Welcome, guys, to another midnight story. But tonight is not like the others. You shouldn't have come here. The shadows are watching your every step. The wind whispers secrets you were never meant to hear. Every creak, every rustle could be your last dot. Do you feel it? The darkness moving just behind you. Welcome to the Midnight Story.
Story 1. The Pickup in the Riverbed. We had just passed the old rust fence where the holler dips into the deadwoods. The kind of place you only find if you already know it's there. My brother Cal and I were trout fishing out in Mudfork, off the trail. The kind of backcountry where cell signals don't go and maps just sort of give up. It was late May, fog clinging low to the trees like a memory that won't let go. We'd been coming out that way since we were kids, but this time something felt off before our boots even hit the gravel. Cal always walked ahead, fly rod in one hand, his pack slung low like it was part of him. I remember thinking the wind felt heavier than it should have, like it was pushing back. The stream bed was mostly dry that year, just trickles of silver slipping between the rocks. No sign of fresh rain in weeks. That's when we saw it. The pickup was wedged crooked into the riverbed, nose down like it had crashed from the trees above, but there was no way it had fallen. Not with the trees so tight together and the rocks showing no drag marks. Rust clung to the frame in thick flakes. A faded blue Chevy, late 70s model, maybe early 80s, with the kind of body style you don't see much anymore. The tailgate was jammed wide open like someone had forced it from the inside with more panic than strength. And there were no plates, no stickers, no footprints. I remember standing there in silence. Just the trickle of water and a crow somewhere behind us. I told Cal to leave it, that it looked wrong. Not just out of place, but out of time. But Cal always had a nose for trouble and a heart that didn't know how to slow down. He dropped his pack and climbed into the bed like he was stepping onto a boat. The whole truck groaned under his weight. Maybe someone ditched it here, he said, peering in the cab. Could be old moonshiner stuff. Or somebody living out here off-grid. I stayed on the riverbank. I didn't want to get any closer. The air smelled wrong near it, like burnt rubber and something metallic underneath, like wet pennies left in the sun. Cal ducked down into the cab and reappeared with a dusty cassette recorder and a bundle of envelopes sealed in red wax and bound with twine. He held them up like a prize catch. The recorder was still running. We sat down on a flat rock and Cal pressed play. It clicked, then whined, and then a man's voice came through, low, panicked, like he was trying to stay quiet while still getting the words out fast. He said his name once, I think, Eli or Ellis, something like that. Then he started talking about a road, said it was cut between the folds of the land, a road that doesn't map right. He said he'd taken a wrong turn near Heron's Pass and ended up on a path that led through fog that didn't burn off, even by noon. The voice kept cracking, sometimes dipping into static, then rising again. There were headlights, he said, real low ones, but no engine sound, just crunching gravel behind me and the smell of wet rust. I stopped, waited. They stopped, too. There was a silence after that, and then a sound I can't explain, like gravel shifting, slow and deliberate. The voice whispered one last thing before the tape cut out. Don't look in the mirrors, they move differently. Cal laughed it off. Probably some loner out here high as hell, freaking himself out. But he looked uneasy. He kept glancing at the tree line, so did I. That night, we camped near the bend in the holler, just a short hike from the truck. Fire crackling, cheap whiskey keeping us warm. Cal tucked the letters and recorder into his bag. Said he'd open the wax seals in the morning, maybe read 'em over breakfast, but I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I heard it. Gravel, shifting like bootsteps just past the firelight. I sat up, heart pounding. The sound didn't come from any direction. It came from every direction at once, circling us like it was looking for the way in. I whispered to Cal. He was already awake. I saw the whites of his eyes wide and wet with fear. Then the smell hit. Rust, heavy and wet, like the inside of a pipe left out in the rain too long. No wind, no animals. Just the shifting and that smell growing stronger until the fire popped and flared like it was gasping. We didn't speak. We just sat there, waiting for whatever it was to pass. Eventually, the steps faded. Not like someone walking away, but like they just stopped existing. We didn't sleep after that. Come sunrise, the whole forest felt quieter, like something had been taken from it. We packed up in a hurry. When we got back to the riverbed, the truck was gone. Not like someone towed it or drove it off. There were no drag marks, no fresh tire tracks in the soft earth. Just two perfect ruts carved into the stone itself, leading nowhere. Like the wheels had been hot enough to burn into granite and then lift away clean. Cal opened his bag. The letters were still there, untouched. But the cassette recorder had melted, warped like it had been in a fire. The battery compartment bubbled. The tape twisted into a black ribbon. We didn't talk much after that. Cal kept the letters for a while, but he never opened them. Said he'd been dreaming about headlights in the trees. Said he'd wake up to the smell of rust. Eventually he buried them out behind our old fishing shed. I never asked where. Years later, Cal moved upstate, got married and had a kid. But he started taking long walks at night. Would drive out past midnight, park at the edge of state land and just sit there. Once, he told me the route had shifted again, that it didn't stay in one place but had found the same kind of people. The ones who wander too far off trail, the ones who get curious. He went missing last winter. They found his truck abandoned off a gravel road 2 counties over, still running. Headlights on, no tracks leading in or out. But on the passenger seat was a new cassette recorder, still warm, and a sealed envelope, wax, still red. I haven't opened it, I won't, but sometimes when I'm alone in the woods I catch a smell in the air that doesn't belong. Rust, warm and wet, and sometimes, if I stand real still, I swear I can hear gravel shift behind me, even when there's nothing there. Story 2, Dead Smoke from the School Bus. I was 13 when my Uncle Wayne took me up Old Gate Ridge, said it was time I learned what real work felt like. He'd been hired by a logging outfit that had half forgotten about a dirt path way up past the timberline. Used to be used back in the 60s, he said, before most of the trees got bought out or burned down. Nobody had touched that slope in decades. There weren't even trail markers, just an old break in the tree line and the kind of hush that doesn't feel right to breathe in. We parked his truck just before the incline started biting up the ridge. The plan was simple: clear the path of brush, check for washouts, and mark any stumps the trucks might need to work around later. He handed me a pair of work gloves 3 sizes too big and a dull machete that rattled when I walked. We didn't talk much. The forest had that thick, wet silence to it, like everything in it was listening and didn't care what you had to say. We were about halfway up when I saw the yellow, not bright yellow, but the faded kind you only see in old photos, sun-bleached and rotting. It peeked through the brush like something trying to hide, a shape the woods had grown around but couldn't quite swallow. We pushed closer, and that's when we saw the bus. It was an old school bus, the long kind, leaning heavy into the brush. One side sunk deep into the earth like it had been trying to disappear. Ivy and moss covered most of the roof. The front was busted in at an angle like it had hit something hard and just stayed there. The windows were fogged with condensation streaked from the inside. The door was open. I remember Uncle Wayne stopping short. He lowered his machete and sucked in a breath through his teeth. I thought it burned, he muttered, more to himself than to me. The engine was cold to the touch. There weren't any tracks, No recent signs of movement, but from the exhaust pipe, a thin trickle of white smoke curled upward, like a breath held too long finally slipping free. I put my hand over the pipe. It wasn't hot, just cold smoke. Dead smoke. Wayne didn't move for a long time. I asked if we should check it out. He shook his head, but his feet started forward anyway. I followed. The steps groaned under our weight, the kind of groan that makes your teeth hurt. Inside, the air was musty and sharp, like wet paper and old fire. The seats were all still there, cracked vinyl and bent metal. Some had patches of moss growing out of the cushions, like the woods had decided to finish what the bus started. But the thing I remember most was the silence, not just the absence of noise. This was something deeper. It was a silence that sat on your chest and made your breath come slow. It was silence that felt watched. I moved toward the back while Wayne stayed by the front, staring at the empty driver's seat. I looked under the benches, expecting to see beer cans or maybe an old sleeping bag, something that made this make sense. Instead, I found the shoes. Dozens of them, all kids' shoes. Small, worn, laces still tied. They were arranged in pairs, everyone facing the front of the bus, like the kids had all taken them off in unison, like they'd been told to. I froze. My breath got caught halfway up my throat. "Uncle Wayne," I said, barely a whisper. He didn't turn, he just said, "Leave them." But I couldn't stop staring. Some shoes still had dirt clinging to the soles, some were scuffed, others neat. One pair had tiny bells stitched to the laces, another had initials scratched on the heel. I could picture the kids wearing them, laughing maybe, not understanding they were part of something they wouldn't come back from. Wayne stepped off the bus without another word. I looked once more toward the front. The driver's mirror was still intact, angled down the aisle. I caught my reflection and something else. A shape behind me, small, barefoot, standing just past the emergency exit door at the back. I turned around fast, nothing there. I jumped off the bus and nearly stumbled into Wayne. His face had gone pale. He looked sick. "I saw this before," he said, voice barely holding together. "Back in '78, I was hauling scrap near Briar Hollow. There was another bus just like this. Same smell, same shoes, same smoke." He lit a cigarette with shaky hands. The sheriff came up to see it. Never came back down. They found his cruiser at the bottom of the ridge, engine running, doors open. No sign of him. Folks said he walked off, but the tracks led back uphill. He dropped the cigarette and crushed it. "We ain't talking about this again. Are we clear?" I nodded. We hiked back down without marking another tree. The work never got finished. Wayne never mentioned the job again. He stopped taking calls from that logging outfit and started going to church every Sunday after that. Real quiet-like. But that bus never left my head. I had dreams for years afterward. In every one, I'd be sitting in the middle row. I'd look out the fogged windows and see children walking between the trees, barefoot, leaving no prints. In the dreams, the engine never starts, but the smoke always comes. 10 years later, I went back. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to see if it was real. Maybe I thought I imagined it. I hiked the ridge alone, followed the same path, and counted the same switchbacks. The bus was gone. Just an indent in the ground where the wheels had sunk and a blackened patch of earth where the exhaust pipe had been. But there were still shoes, new ones now, piled neatly at the edge of the woods. And when I turned to leave, I swore I heard a metal creak, like a door swinging open. I haven't been back since, but every so often, when I pass a hill road late at night and see fog curling off the trees, I catch a flicker of yellow through the brush, a shape just out of sight. And I feel something watching me from a mirror I didn't look into. Story 3. The sedan left in Fog Hollow. It was supposed to be a quick weekend trip. Me and Erin, a borrowed tent, and just enough gas money to get out past the cell towers. She liked places without lights, somewhere the sky still felt wild and wide. Fog Hollow was marked on an old trail map her grandfather gave her, a place he remembered from when he was young, said it was good for solitude, trout fishing, maybe mushrooms if the season was right. No campsites, just a dirt road loop around a dried out creek bed and a handful of empty pull-offs where trees leaned too close to the road. She smiled when we hit the gravel. I didn't. The air was thick, humid in that way, where the sweat clings to you before it even starts. The sun was already behind the ridge by the time we made it to the hollow. The road dipped low, then lower, the trees gathering around us like they wanted us small. The car, my old Civic, started acting up just after the third bend. The check engine light blinked on. Power cut for half a second, then returned like nothing happened. I pulled off, figuring we'd let it rest before trying again. That's when we saw it. Parked just off the shoulder, maybe 20 feet into the overgrowth, was a blue sedan. Not navy or cobalt, just faded blue like a pair of old jeans left in the rain. The windows were fogged from the inside, thick streaks that ran like fingertips had wiped them once, then disappeared. The body was rusted through in patches, and one of the rear tires was sunken into the soft earth. It looked like it hadn't moved in years. We figured maybe someone left it while hiking, but there were no footprints, just scattered gear, an old cooler with the lid cracked open, rotted tarp tangled in briars, and what looked like a child's shoe half buried in the moss. That part chilled me. I couldn't explain why. "Looks abandoned," Erin said, crouching near it. "It's hot out," I replied, not moving from the road. "Why are the windows fogged?" She shrugged and circled it once, said the doors were locked. We tried not to think too hard about it and pitched our tent just off the gravel, on a patch of dirt where the grass still had tire tread pressed into it. The trees above us bent low, moss trailing like dead curtains. Something about the silence here felt stretched, too still. We made a fire, ate beef jerky, laughed about how unprepared we were, and held each other when the darkness finally wrapped around us. It started just after midnight. A low hum came through the trees, not loud enough to scare us at first. Just strange. The kind of sound you can't find the source of, like a vibration running through the bones of the woods. Then we heard it, the static. A radio had turned on. At first, I thought it was my car. I grabbed the flashlight and walked back to it. Nothing. The Civic was silent. But when I turned toward the hollow, I saw the blue sedan, its radio glowing soft orange through the fogged glass. A thin ribbon of static poured from the inside. Then the channel shifted slowly, like someone turning the dial with great care. It landed on a faint melody, just humming. No words, just a man's voice humming like he was remembering something old and broken. I backed away. Erin came up beside me. "Did you turn it on?" "No, I didn't touch it." The fog thickened fast after that, rolling in from nowhere, soaking everything. The air felt colder even though the heat hadn't left. I tried to peer inside the car to see if someone was inside, but the closer I got, the more the glass fogged. I wiped a patch clear with my sleeve. That's when I saw the handprints. Small ones, so many I couldn't count them, all over the inside of the glass, pressed in with just enough force to leave clear outlines, tiny palms, splayed fingers. They moved slightly, like the condensation was still fresh. I took 2 steps back, heart hammering. Erin whispered my name, but I couldn't look away. One of the handprints was on the outside now. We didn't speak, we just moved. We threw everything in the car, left the tent behind, and started hiking. The Civic wouldn't start, and there was no signal. We took the emergency flashlight and headed north, following the road by moonlight. Every sound behind us felt like a step. Every shadow looked like fingers. We walked for miles. Around 3 a.m., We reached a ranger's tower, abandoned, but with an old radio antenna and a landline. Somehow it still worked. A trooper came for us just after sunrise. A big man with a smoker's cough and a face that looked carved from tree bark. He didn't laugh when I told him about the sedan. "I'll check it," he said, but something in his voice had changed. When he came back, he asked us to show him exactly where it was. We drove with him. My Civic started the first try and went all the way back down into Fog Hollow. We found our tent still there. We found our fire pit, our footprints, but not the sedan. No tire marks, no tarp, no cooler, no child's shoes, just grass. Unbroken, like nothing had been there for years. The trooper radioed something in, then stepped aside with another officer. Erin and I sat on the back bumper of the cruiser. I couldn't stop staring at the trees, trying to find that blue again, half expecting to see it just past the shadows. He came back 20 minutes later, face grimmer than before. There's no record of any car matching that make or model being left out here. The closest match was one reported stolen back in '91, a blue Mercury Topaz. Never recovered. He hesitated. A couple kids went missing the same weekend. Campers, a family of 3. Nobody ever found the little one. We didn't say anything. What could we say? The trooper offered to escort us back to town. We followed behind in our car. Halfway back, Erin grabbed my arm and pointed at the windshield. The inside of the glass had fogged, and on the passenger side, just above the dash, a single small handprint had appeared. Perfect, clear, pressed from the inside. Neither of us touched it. We drove in silence the rest of the way, never stopping, not even for gas. I sold that car 2 months later. I couldn't bring myself to drive it. Erin and I split not long after. She couldn't sleep anymore and said she dreamed about fog rolling under doors and radios turning on by themselves. I understood. I did too. I haven't been back to Fog Hollow since. But sometimes, when I'm parked at a red light or sitting in my driveway after dark, the inside of the windshield starts to fog, just for a moment. And once in a while, when I wipe it away, there's a handprint. Story 4, the hearse behind Stillwater Church. I had been out that way before, maybe 5 or 6 years back, but the place felt different now, more forgotten. Stillwater Valley sits between 2 ridgelines out near Carter's Field, the kind of spot that doesn't show up on maps anymore, where the trails have long since grown over and no one can quite tell you where the old footbridges were. I'd been hiking solo for a few days, trying to clear my head. Things back home had been unraveling. Nothing dramatic, just the slow kind of unraveling that makes you feel hollow in the middle. The woods were supposed to help with that. The quiet usually did. Late on my 3rd day, I found the chapel. I hadn't planned to end up there. I was following a dry stream bed down into a clearing when the trees pulled back and the sky dimmed in a way that didn't feel like cloud cover. The chapel had collapsed mostly on itself, half the roof gone, moss overtaking the wood, stained glass shattered like ice around the edges, but something about it held its shape, like it didn't want to fall all the way. There was no sign or cross left, just the skeleton of a place that had once held people who believed. Behind the chapel, sunk partway into the soft earth, was the hearse. Black, long, the kind with those curtained windows and the heavy frame that looked built for storms. Both front doors were missing. The back door hung open, half buried in weeds, and inside was a wooden box. Coffin-shaped, yes, but different. No handles, no carvings, just plain, dark wood sealed shut with long iron nails. It didn't look new, but it hadn't rotted either. The wood didn't flake, the metal didn't rust. I thought maybe it was a leftover Halloween setup, something some kids had built a decade ago and forgotten. But when I touched it, it was warm, not sun-warmed. It had been overcast all day. This warmth came from inside. I pulled my hand back fast, instinctively. It felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain, like I'd just brushed against something alive that was trying not to flinch. The woods behind me were quiet, still water quiet. I told myself I was overreacting, that maybe the wood had absorbed something. Maybe the hearse had some weird thermal retention from being underground. I walked back around to the chapel and sat for a bit, taking a long drink of water I didn't need. I set up camp just east of the clearing that night. Didn't feel right pitching my tent near the ruins, and I sure as hell wasn't going to sleep beside that hearse. I built a fire small and low, ate cold beef jerky, and told myself I'd be gone by sunrise. But the night didn't want to end. I kept waking up, not from sound exactly, but from movement. The tent would shift real slow, not flapping like in the wind, more like someone dragging a finger across the fabric. I sat up, listening. The woods made no sound, no bugs, no birds, just breathe. My own, too loud in the silence. Once, I reached out and touched the wall of the tent just as it bowed in. Something was on the other side, pressing, not clawing, not pushing, just laying its weight against it like it wanted me to know it was there but didn't need to rush. I didn't sleep after that. By morning, the fog had lifted but the unease hadn't. I stepped outside and saw them. Prints, all around the tent in a perfect circle, barefoot, human mostly, but the toes, God, the toes were wrong, too long, too thin, like they'd been stretched, like someone had walked on them too long, too far, until the shape of them forgot how to be feet. I packed up in less than 5 minutes, didn't eat, didn't drink, just walked. All the way out of the valley without stopping. I didn't even look back when I passed the chapel. I didn't want to know if it was still there. I didn't want to see if the box had moved. I didn't talk about it either, not for months. Not until fall rolled around and some buddies of mine from town wanted to do a Halloween hike, something spooky and off-grid. I didn't tell them the whole story, just said I knew a place they might want to see. Stillwater was different this time. No birds, no breeze. The sky was the same pale grey it had been before, but the air was heavier, like it remembered me. We hiked to where the chapel had been, but there was nothing, no splinters, no foundation. Just a shallow dip in the land where the earth was dark and the grass refused to grow. Behind it, where the hearse had been, were drag marks. Not fresh, but not old either. 2 long grooves in the dirt that led from the clearing down toward the creek. The ground around them was disturbed, like something had rolled or crawled out and dragged itself into the trees. One of my friends laughed, said it must have been a bear. Another took photos. I said nothing. That night, back home, I locked every window. I shoved a dresser in front of the front door. I stayed up watching the hallway shadows like they might shift without sound. And just before dawn, I thought I heard something creak. Not inside, from underneath. Story 5, Red Lights, past Boone's Hill. It was just after 10 when I rounded Boone's Hill, that slow curve past the old rockfall where the guardrails still bent from some wreck years ago. I was driving back from my cousin's place near Yellow Hollow, trying to make it home before the fog set in. That stretch of road always felt longer at night. Twists tighter, trees lean closer. I've driven it 100 times, but that night felt different before anything even happened. Like the road was remembering something and waiting for me to catch up. I saw the taillights just before the bend. They were low, dim, blinking slow like an old metronome. A classic car, El Camino by the shape of it, half tucked into the ditch, front wheels sunk, the back end sticking out like a wound. Hazard lights clicking steady. I slowed, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. We don't leave folks stranded out here. That's not how we were raised. The engine was running, Not loud, but that low purr that feels like a breath being held. I left my headlights on and stepped out into the quiet. The air smelled like cold iron. No movement, no driver. Just that car, lights blinking like it was trying to say something in Morse. I called out, "You all alright?" No answer. I approached the driver's side, careful not to slip on the soft gravel. The door was cracked open an inch. The cab inside was clean, no blood, no clutter, just empty. That's when I saw the glove box. It was hanging open, and inside were stacks of black and white photographs. All the same woman, maybe late 30s, hair pulled back, eyes wide and dark. In every photo she was standing in different places, fields, cabins, porches, but always looking past the camera, not into it, past it, like she saw something behind whoever was taking the picture. Her face didn't change. No smile, no blink. I leaned in to grab one, felt the cold air from the vent hit my cheek, and heard it, just behind me, a cough, not a loud one. Just the kind you'd make clearing your throat, like someone letting you know they were standing right there. I spun around fast. Nothing, just trees. Fog is starting to gather at the edge of the road. The hair on my arms stood up like wire. I backed away from the car, got in my truck, and left without looking back. I didn't speed. I didn't blast the radio. I just drove. Quiet, like I was afraid to wake something up. A week passed. I didn't tell anybody. What could I say? That I found a ghost car with a pile of old photos and phantom coughing. Boone's Hill didn't need another story. Folks already whispered about that stretch, about the preacher's son who vanished in '91, or the girl who wandered off barefoot in winter and was never found. People say the fog up there has a memory. The following Friday, I was coming back from town. Same road, same time, same bend. And there it was, the El Camino. Same spot, same slow blink of the hazard lights. Like it never left. But this time, I didn't stop. I slowed just enough to look. I told myself it was curiosity, but it was something deeper, something under the skin. The driver's door was wide open, and there was a new stack of photos on the dash. Not old ones, not yellowed or curled, new. On top was a photo of me standing beside the El Camino. Same clothes I wore last week, same expression, same road. It was me, taken from behind, like someone was watching me lean into the driver's side door. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't shake the feeling that the photo hadn't just captured me, but caught me. The next morning, I drove up to Boone's Hill again, this time in daylight. No fog, no car. Just tire ruts in the gravel and a patch of burnt grass where the engine had idled too long. I walked the ditch, hoping maybe I'd find some sign, footprints, another photo, something to explain it. But there was nothing, only silence. That afternoon I checked the mail. Mixed in with bills and junk was an unmarked envelope. Inside was a photo. Same woman, this time standing in front of my house, looking past the camera. I haven't been back up that road since. But every once in a while, driving after dark, I catch a flicker of red light in my rear view, blinking slowly, waiting. Story 6. Rust behind the gas station. I started working the night shift at Hal's Gas and Go off Route 9 back in the fall of 2015. It wasn't much of a place, just 2 pumps, flickering lights, and a small convenience store that always smelled faintly of wet cardboard and something sweeter underneath, like old candy melting behind the counter. It sat right at the base of the ridge, where the woods got thick fast and stayed dark even during the day. Most of our customers were truckers or drifters headed somewhere else. Locals didn't come out that way much after sundown. I liked the quiet. After midnight, the world slowed down. I'd sweep, stock the fridge, maybe read a bit. There was a comfort in the routine. I knew all the sounds the store made, when the cooler kicked on, when the light over the register buzzed. It's funny how your brain learns the patterns of a place without trying. You know when something shifts, and something did. It was just past 2 a.m. when I stepped out back for a smoke. I usually stood by the dumpsters, looking out past the tree line while the embers lit my fingers. That night, I saw a shape I hadn't seen before. Nestled between the trees, maybe 10 yards off the gravel lot, was a car, a hatchback, or what was left of one. The thing was rotting in place, paint flaked down to orange-red rust, windows nearly opaque with moss, like it had been sitting for years. But I'd never noticed it, and I went out there every night. It wasn't hidden, wasn't buried in brush. It was just there, like it had unfolded out of the dark. I walked a few steps closer. The smell hit me hard. Rotten eggs and burnt rubber, thick in the back of my throat. There were long, uneven scratches down the trunk, like something had dragged claws or tools across the metal. Not once, but over and over, until the grooves ran deep. I didn't look inside, didn't even touch it. Something in my chest told me not to. I flicked the cigarette away and backed off, more rattled than I wanted to admit. Went inside, locked the back door, and sat behind the counter pretending to read, but my eyes kept drifting to the monitor feed. We had 4 security cameras. One faced the pumps, one in the store, one over the register, and one pointed out back. Low quality, black and white, but enough to see what you needed to. I watched the rear cam as the hours crawled on. Between 2 and 3 a.m., something started to happen. Frame by frame, the car moved. Not all at once. Not like it rolled. It shifted. Every few seconds it edged closer to the lot. No driver, no lights, no tracks in the gravel. Just slow, deliberate movements, like it was sliding on rails I couldn't see. At 3 a.m. sharp, it stopped. Then the feed glitched once, just a single frame skip, and the car was gone. I checked outside. Nothing. I told myself it was a camera glitch, maybe a prank. Maybe Hal was messing with me. But when I rewound the footage the next morning, it was still there, clear as day. Something had moved that car. The next night, I thought about calling off, but I didn't. Pride's a funny thing. Sometimes it pushes you right into the fire just to prove you're not afraid of smoke. It was around 2:15 when I looked up from the register and saw it again. This time, it was closer. Parked right outside pump 3. No engine noise, no headlights. Just there. The rust looked wetter now, like it had been sweating. The trunk lid was bent, pulled open a couple inches, like something had tried to crawl out or back in. I stepped out without thinking. I remember the cold air, how quiet it was. I walked around the car slowly, keeping my distance. The windows were still fogged. But something moved inside, just a twitch, a shifting shape. I backed away. Behind me, the store door clicked shut. When I turned, the lights inside flickered once, then again. I pulled the handle, locked. I hadn't locked it. The camera above the pump buzzed softly. I looked up at it, knowing it saw everything. Later, when they reviewed the footage, it showed me walking out. It showed me looking into the car. It showed me turning, but I never came back. Not on the tape. Just a static blur at the edge of the frame where I should have been. Then the car slowly backed away on its own, disappearing into the tree line. They found me just before dawn, curled up behind the dumpster, half conscious. Palms stained black, like I'd been holding onto something greasy. I didn't remember falling. Didn't remember anything past the fog on the window. I was taken to the hospital for observation. They said I had a seizure, said I was dehydrated. I let them believe it. I quit the gas station that week, never went back. But sometimes, late at night, I dream in grainy black and white. I see the parking lot from above. I see myself stepping out. and I see that hatchback still moving, just a little closer each time. Story 7. They dug around the Bronco. It was October when my cousin Jake rented the cabin up by Tiller's Bend. He'd just gotten out of a bad stretch, lost his job at the plant, broke up with his fiancée, started talking like he wanted to be out in the woods for a while, off-grid. Said the quiet might set his head straight. I was between shifts at the time, and when he invited me up for a weekend, I figured it wouldn't hurt to get away. I remembered Tiller's Bend from fishing trips with Dad, steep trails, stubborn fog, and that constant feeling like the trees were crowding in. There were cabins scattered across the ridge, some lived in, some not. His was one of the smaller ones, tucked in past a gravel pull-off where the road ends and foot trails begin. We spent the first night drinking cheap whiskey on the porch, listening to the wind skim through the pine. Jake seemed better than he had in months. Talkative, sharp-eyed, less weighed down. Said he'd been hiking every day, clearing brush around the property, trying to mark old trails on a paper map. But there was one spot he hadn't gone back to, something he stumbled across 3 days prior. He got quiet when he brought it up, said it was up past the West Ridge, where the land flattens for a bit before dropping into what locals call Blind Elk Hollow. "There's an old Bronco up there," he said, not looking at me, like halfway buried. And someone or something tried to dig it out. The next day he wanted to show me. We packed light and hiked out mid-morning. The trail started clear but turned to the deer path quickly. That whole area hadn't seen maintenance in decades. Trees leaned across the path, and the moss was thick, like skin trying to cover an old wound. It was about an hour in when I saw the first of the holes. They were small at first, maybe a foot wide, like someone had dug with their hands. No tools, just fingers and time. The soil was fresh in the middle but dry around the edges, as if the hole had been open and left untouched for days. As we walked, they grew more frequent, more deliberate, arranged in arcs, then in loops, then in spirals that spread wider from a center point I couldn't yet see. That's when I started to feel it, that humming in the chest, low and nervous, like the woods were holding their breath. We found the Bronco at the center of the last spiral. It was an older model, late 70s maybe, once red but now more rust than paint. It looked like it had been buried up to the windows and then clawed out. Dirt still clung to the frame in thick patches, and the windshield was cracked like a spiderweb. The tires were half deflated. All 4 doors hung slightly ajar. Jake was drawn to it, the way a man leans toward a fire he knows he shouldn't touch. "It wasn't like this last time," he said. "It was more under." He started toward it, boots crunching through the disturbed soil. I told him to hang back, that something about the whole scene felt wrong, but he wasn't hearing it. I stayed put. He climbed into the driver's side. The door let out a dry groan as it opened. He slid into the seat and sat still for a second, looking around the cab. Then the door slammed shut. I didn't touch it. It shut itself. The horn blared, one long, sharp note that echoed up the trees like a scream. I jumped and ran to the door, yanking it open. Jake was gone, just gone. His boots were still on the pedals, not dropped, not neatly placed, still laced as if he'd stepped out of them without bending down. The keys dangled from the ignition, gently swaying. The inside of the cab was quiet, except for the faint tick of the cooling metal. There was no sign of struggle, no blood, no clothing, no prints. Just a thin coating of dust that hadn't been there a second ago. I stood there, heart pounding so hard it made my ears ring. I shouted his name until my voice cracked. I ran the trails, searched every spiral of holes. Nothing. The forest was just quiet. I filed the report that evening. Search and rescue came up with dogs and flashlights and volunteers, combed the area for 3 days. On the 4th day, they found the Bronco again. But it wasn't where I'd last seen it. It was a mile up the ridge, sitting dead center in a clearing that hadn't been cleared before. No trail leading to it, no drag marks, just the Bronco, like it had been lowered there. When the crew popped the doors, they found nothing inside. No boots, no keys, but dirt had poured in through the cracks. Deep, dry layers packed inches high across the floorboards and seats. They never found Jake. No sign, no remains, just a missing persons case and a vehicle they eventually towed out and logged into impound. I tried to explain what I saw, but every word sounded thinner the more I spoke. I could feel people backing away from it, like they wanted to believe I was lying, easier than the alternative. Months passed. I moved back to town, got a job at a lumber yard, and stopped hiking altogether. But I'd hear things sometimes, scratchy static on the radio, an old engine coughing out by the tree line when I walked the dog. Little things. Last week, I drove out toward Tiller's Bend again. I don't know why. Maybe I thought enough time had passed. Maybe I wanted to see if the trail still remembered me. I stopped at the gravel pull-off and sat for a while, watching the trees. Then I noticed the holes, just a few at first, neatly dug into the gravel like someone had started again, digging towards something, or away. Story 8. The van beneath the fire tower. It started like a lot of bad ideas do. Half a joke, half a dare. All of us trying too hard to pretend we weren't afraid of things we didn't understand. There's this old fire tower near Calhoun Creek, up past where the gravel gets too mean for sedans, and the trees start leaning toward the road like they want to whisper things to you. Locals say the tower got shut down in the early 80s after a lightning strike took out part of the upper deck. It's not on any tourist maps, and the Forest Service fenced it off years ago, but fences don't mean much when you're 17 and looking to prove something. There were 5 of us, me, my cousin Tyler, and our friends Amos, Riley, and June. Tyler was the one who brought it up, said his uncle told him about a van that had been left up there, burnt out, weird as hell, never explained. Said it just showed up one summer. No path in, no plates, just rust and stories. We figured if we could make it up there, snap a few pictures, maybe climb the tower and come back down in one piece, it'd be worth something. Bragging rights, if nothing else. We left just after noon, hiked up the trailhead near the old hunting cabin, then cut west toward Calhoun Ridge. The higher we got, the quieter the woods became. Birds stopped calling, even the wind settled. I don't know when we first noticed, but somewhere around the halfway mark the air started to smell strange, like hot plastic and old wires. Not strong, just a thread of it, enough to make your throat catch. When we reached the tower clearing, everything felt off. The fire tower stood tall and crooked, its top platform half missing, stairs twisted like bones. Kudzu had swallowed most of the base, but it was what lay beneath the tower that stopped us in our tracks. A white van, or what was left of one. It was almost completely buried in the vines, just the outline visible at first. But as we stepped closer, we could see the rust, the broken glass, and the thick melted streaks that ran down the sides like wax. The front door hung open at an angle, crooked on its hinges. Inside, everything was blackened. The seats had collapsed in on themselves, foam and fabric fused into lumps. Dashboard half melted. The back was worse, metal twisted like it had buckled under heat, and yet the forest around it was untouched. No scorched trees, no blackened earth. Just that smell again, stronger now. Burnt plastic and something sour underneath it. It didn't look like a wreck. It looked like something had burned inward. Riley stepped closer. "Have you ever seen fire melt glass like that?" he asked, pointing to the windows which looked bubbled and fused around the edges. "No," Amos said, crouching near the front tire. "Not without a hell of a lot more damage outside." There were no tire tracks, no drag marks, No sign of how the van had gotten there. Tyler pulled out his phone, snapped a few pictures, and started toward the tower stairs. "Let's go up before the sun starts dropping. Are you all good?" We followed. The stairs groaned with every step. Metal on wood, rust on rot. None of us said much as we climbed, just the sound of boots and breath, and the occasional creak of something we hoped wouldn't snap. The higher we got, the more you could see how far the forest stretched. Nothing but green and shadow in every direction. June reached the top first, stood near the edge of the broken platform and looked down. "I think I see something moving," she said. "What? Down there?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "By the van." I stepped beside her and looked. The van was still there, still broken, still open. Then the door slammed shut. Not a breeze, not the wind. It slammed with force, metal on metal, echoing up through the trees like a gunshot. We ran. The stairs shook as we descended too fast, skipping steps. I could hear someone behind me saying, "No, no, no, no," like a prayer. When we hit the ground, the van was gone. Gone. Not moved, not hidden. Just gone. Only thing left were 2 long tire tracks in the dirt, still steaming, like something heavy and hot had peeled away just seconds before we arrived. The smell was overwhelming now. Molten plastic, burnt rubber, and underneath it all, something like breath. Thick, sour, human. Amos dropped to his knees and threw up in the brush. Riley stood with his hands on his head, muttering that we hadn't heard any engine. Nothing driving off, not even the sound of twigs snapping. June just stared at the tire marks, not blinking. I remember putting my hand on the hood of a nearby stump to steady myself, and it was warm, not sun-warmed, hot, like something had passed right over it. We didn't talk much on the hike back. The woods felt smaller, denser. Every sound had a shape to it. Every shadow felt aimed. June stopped twice to look behind her. Tyler kept glancing at his phone like the photos might vanish if he didn't keep checking. No one laughed. Not once. We made it back to the trailhead just before dark. That night, I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about how the van had looked, burned from the inside. Like whatever happened hadn't started with a crash or a leak. Like it had begun with something inside needing out. The next morning, Tyler texted me. The pictures were gone. Every single one. Not corrupted, just gone, like they'd never been taken. A week later, I drove back up there alone. I don't know why. Maybe to prove it to myself. Maybe to check if the van had returned. The trail was the same, the clearing was the same, but the tower was gone. All of it. No metal, no foundation, just empty grass where something should have stood. And in the dirt, 2 fresh tire marks, stretching from the woods, stopping just where the base of the tower used to be. The soil is still warm beneath my boots. I turned back then. Haven't returned since. But every now and then, when I drive past the edge of the ridge, I catch the scent of something faint. Burnt plastic, rubber, and breath.